Well, hi everyone. This is Sony Artisan and Stingray Ambassador Don Smith, and I would like to welcome you to my May tip of the month. And this is a picture, obviously, of this past Sunday's lunar eclipse, and the moon was close enough to Earth. I think they define a supermoon as being within 90% as close to the Earth's path in perigee as it could possibly get, and this one was within 90%. In fact, we're going to have three more full moons coming up, June, July, August, and they will actually even be a little closer. But we will not be experiencing another blood moon lunar eclipse until November 8th of this year, which is kind of cool. And it's going to, this time you're going to be able to get the whole thing primarily shot through the night, at least out here on the West Coast. I know that's going to happen. You're going to have to check your times where you live. Unfortunately, that time of the year, I'm going to be down traveling to Patagonia with Barry and my partner Ron Madra for finally getting our Patagonia, which was supposed to be fall in Patagonia, now moved to spring in Patagonia, all courtesy of 2.5 years of dealing with COVID. But nonetheless, let's get back to this picture. This is, I posted this out on my social media, I think on Tuesday, late Tuesday, and this has become one of my most liked and most commented pictures that I think I have ever posted ever since I started doing social media back in 2014, I think is when I first started on Facebook. And now I post on Facebook and Instagram and a couple other sites. And this thing just went off the charts as far as how did you do it? Where is that? And I had put all that information in there. Of course, you know, I've learned over the years in social media, nobody reads, or nobody reads. It's a visceral, quick reaction. They just react to the picture. They get jacked up, and they don't take the time to read anything you've written. I've even written a blog on this. If you go to my website at donsmithphotography.com, click on the blog link on the homepage. It's currently up, and it's quite extensive. How the thought came to me, how I went out and shot it, and then how did I put it together. Even having said that, I go back to my old saying: not a lot of people like to read. So I've had people, ask specific questions about specific technicalities of capturing and putting this together. So I thought, for those of you that are just visual, which all of us are as visual artists, I'll just go ahead and share the information, knowing that another one's coming up in November. And you could start, not too early to start your planning right now. And this took a lot of planning. Probably start to finish, I invested about 40 hours of my time, but it wasn't 40 hours of work, it was 40 hours labor of love, really. It was a fun adventure. And over the 44 years that I've made my living as a photographer, I have never, ever once tried to do a sequence shot. With my sports photography early in my career, that was all one and done. And with my landscape photography over the past 20 plus years, I like doing single frame photography and not composites. I think the world is getting too full of fake skies and people trying to put it off as this is exactly what I saw to get likes on social media. So I'm going to put it right up on the front. This is a composite. There's no other way this picture could have been made. But the elements are all real. This wasn't something I went out and grabbed stock photos. I captured all the elements. And I thought about my background very seriously. I drove up to where I knew I was going to shoot the moon at elevation. And it just wasn't going to work as far as a suitable background to have the moon coming over. And there was nothing interesting in the eastern looking sky that I could utilize. And I'm kind of new to this area, 10 months. And so I finally stopped myself after racking my brain, what did I want as my background image? Said, well, what's the most iconic feature on the Central Coast? And that is the Morro Bay rock. And it's in the town where I live in Morro Bay. I see it out of my office window every day. And it was kind of like the light went on, and I said, gee, you have this right in your backyard. Use this. It will be interesting. But I'm disclosing that where you're seeing my view of the rock here, which, by the way, is about 580 feet tall. It's a volcanic plug, and half of it sits in the Pacific Ocean. On the backside of that's the opening of the harbor for the Morro Bay harbor. The moon just would not go over that because I'm looking basically kind of southwest in this direction, more south than west. And so the moon is, this would all be playing out over to camera left and out of the frame. Really, the only way I could have got this was get on a very big, stable boat, which was impractical, and get out on the ocean and try to pull this off on a boat in the ocean, looking back towards Morro Bay. But then Morro Bay is a hillside community with a lot of homes that slope up on a hill, and I would have had to deal with all the light pollution, which wasn't going to work anyway. So the conception of the shot was to do a night shot of the rock and then get up to elevation, which we went up to 720-foot elevation, and we captured the moons. So this spanned over 2 evenings. And I want to click here. Here is the night shot. This was actually captured the night before the full moons. And the reason we did this, we went out for a scouting trip, which I'm going to show you here and explain in just a moment. And on the way back home, it was a clear night. We probably had the best weather day we had here in months. No wind, 76 degrees, clear sky, and the biggest thing, no fog. So I had told my wife, Barry, I said, let's get down on the beach. Let's get this shot captured in case Sunday night, when the actual eclipse was happening, the fog, if the fog would have pushed in, I would have lost a chance to shoot this. And every day that goes by, we're edging closer and closer into our summer fog season. So that's my base image. And then in my mind, it was clear that the moons were either going to go up this way, and that was the first way I planned it. But with the brightest moon when it exited the eclipse being here, it just tugged the eye away. And then I thought, why not just go with the natural formation of the rock, which is a beautiful arcing curve, and just arc the moons over the top. And you'll see when we start putting this together that you're going to create a layer for every one of these moons that you bring in. So even though I had it going this way, I could go back and just start clicking on each individual layer and pulling the moon down. And I'll show you how I went about sizing this moon. And you can see from here to here in the finished image, I selected this whole area down here and worked on it. I did a lot of dodging and burning. And the reason this parking lot looks lit is, let's go over, well, there's 2 reasons. There was a full moon up Saturday night to camera left when I did shoot it. There's the original. Now that's the same frame. This was the original frame. So you can see I darkened down this part of the sky, this part of the sky. That was very easy. I just lassoed them, feathered it like 300 pixels to get a nice transition, then just used the curves and pulled down till I got the skies kind of each side of the sky matching up. The reason it's bright on the left and bright on the right, kind of interesting, and I'll explain why it's bright in the foreground. To the left is the town of Morro Bay. Down below here is a parking area, which I'll show you in just a moment here. And over here to the right, they've been dredging the harbor for the past 3 weeks, the Army Corps of Engineers with this huge ship. And they park it right out here at night, and I guess they sleep on it. And then they've been coming in every day and doing the dredging at the entrance of the harbor. And then behind us, there was an entire setup of a wedding that was very cool going on. I'm new to the area, only been here 10 months, and I didn't know you could even rent and put something like that on. And they had gone all out, put wooden platforms in, a lot of lights, a live band, dancing. There was probably a couple hundred people there. It was really cool. So we were serenaded with music as we were out shooting this. We were not alone. So I had to kind of dodge and burn this down because it looks like, you know, there's light hitting it everywhere. And that's just all these lights coming off this wedding setup that was behind us. Let me get into a little bit more of this here. Um, I want to go this way. This was my original intent, and I captured this image with the Sony A7S III and the Sony 16 to 35 G Master. And if we look up here, this was at 24 millimeter f4. It's a 2.8 lens, but I'll usually, because there was so much light, I'll stop down a stop just to make it a little sharper. But my problem was there's a big parking area right here, and it was such a beautiful evening. It was one of the first evenings we had had in probably 3 weeks where the wind wasn't just howling through here. It was just super calm out there. It was a beautiful night. But because it was a beautiful night, and because it was a Saturday night, a lot of people wanted to be out on the beach. So you can see a lot of activity going on in the parking lot there. I could have cloned that out. These lights back up in here, there's some lights along a walkway by the harbor, and then way off in the distance there, those are just homes up on that far hill back in there. I could have cloned this all up and cleaned it up and leveled it out and worked on it, but we started to move east back up the beach, and you can see the shadows being thrown by the dunes here. That's actually lit by the moon. And then this shadow behind me was the lights behind me of the wedding lighting it up. So we had plenty of light to light the foreground. So I kept moving east, and finally I started to get the parking lot hidden. And then this was, I'm gonna undo this. This was let's just hit reset here because that looks terrible. And I started to go to work processing this image with a lot of dodging and burning down in here. I used the mask to select the sky, and let's see if we can tone that down. Yeah, see how you can tone that down with just a selection on the sky? And then I would flip that mask over, I would invert it and start working in here. It took a while. Now, I went out on a scouting trip with Barry. You never want to try to do a shot like this. Let me get back into grid mode here. I'm hitting the wrong key. When you're planning a moonshot, and I'm not going to have time to teach you this you can find on your own. I use 2 sets of software. The Photographer's Ephemeris is my #1 software for plotting any moon. And I had a good idea where I wanted to go, which is you're looking down here at the Morro Bay rock. So the beach we shot, the establishing shot of the rock from at night, I was standing right about there shooting this way down the coastline. You could see if I wanted to shoot the moons from up here and make this a lot smaller and what have you, you're going to deal with all these lights here. The town of Morro Bay is right over here to the left. So I decided on elevation A, and the main reason because if we start getting the mist and fog blowing in, I would have lost the moon if I would have tried to even shoot it from down here on the beach, and it just wouldn't have lined up with the rock anyway. So I went up, well, first I plotted it on the Photographer's Ephemeris, and I'll keep talking as I'm scrolling and looking at pictures. This will give you a better idea. That's a processed image of what it looks like from up there. And we were standing at roughly, there's 5 pullouts up there you could go to. So that was the first thing on Saturday night, figure out what pullout we were going to shoot from. And this was back still when I was having the idea. I thought maybe the moons would start over in here and arc in here, but I had that wrong. They were way off to camera left. And let's see if we can find those. I shot the sunset while I was waiting. And yeah, here comes the moon. It gives you, at least will give you an idea. That's what it was going to line up over. And I'm thinking, okay, that's not really good. There's nothing, this is all going to go to silhouette on Sunday night. So that's why I scrapped the idea. If the moon would have started over in here and came up, and again, this is me just not knowing the area, I would have opted to shoot everything up here, but it just wasn't going to do that. So let's get back into the actual evening. This is the end of Saturday night now as we were driving home. And as I said, let me get back to the image I chose. that's the image I chose on Sunday morning. I got up and processed it to a point. I knew I would be tweaking this a little more once I got the moons in there to kind of get it more to my liking. So that's how that all came about. So part one of two. Then it was go time on Sunday night. And the night prior, on Saturday night, the moon rose right over this peak. So the moon is now on a southern trajectory until summer solstice on the 21st. The moon's heading south, the sun's heading north. On the 21st of June, it's going to reverse. The moon's going to start coming north, and for 6 months, the sun's going to start heading south. So you're going to need to know that on November 8th, when the next lunar eclipse happens, the moon is going to be about 5 weeks away or 4 weeks away from its furthest southerly track. So keep that in mind as you're starting to plan your shots. So with the moon coming up here, it took, and from our vantage point, it took exactly 25 minutes later than posted moonrise time. Why is that important? Because I needed to know what time to be there, and know when I'm going to see the moon. And that's what the photographer's ephemeris told me. And then when I got up there, I said I used two softwares. Then I switched to photo pills. And they have a cool thing called augmented reality or visual reality where you can actually hold your smartphone up with the app open and it will show you directly the path the moon's coming. Well, I knew the moon was going to be further south on Sunday. And see that slope right there? I calculated that was going to gain me back about 5 minutes, and I missed it by a minute, but I was pretty much right on the mark. So on Sunday, the moon was rising at 7:54, and sunset was 8:01. So doing a quick math calculation on that, it was with 20 minutes. It was going to be 8:14, or exactly 13 minutes past sunset, when we were going to see the moon come up. And we did indeed see it at that time. I just waited till it kind of cleared off this mountain so I could get in tight on it and start shooting. As you're seeing now, these are my frames that are kind of the go time. It's and let me see. Let me click on that. I started, all my moons were going to be shot, and I shot my moons with the Sony A7S III and the Sony 200 to 600 racked all the way out to 600. Now, a couple of questions I can hear in your mind already. Well, that moon's still semi-small. Why didn't you put like a converter on it and get it bigger? Well, if any wind would have kicked up, the more magnification you have in a lens, the more chance you have in not being able to steady that image out without going to a high shutter speed, which means a very high ISO to compensate. I hope that all makes sense. Because I shot it at f8. That lens does open up at 600 millimeter to 6.3, but I always try to stop down 2/3 to a stop if I can, just to gain back some sharpness. And we had a very calm night up there, fortunately. Problem number two, as you can see here on one of the process shots, because it was dusk, the sky wasn't black. And as I'm going to show you, the magic comes in the blend modes. How do we get these moons to drop out so we can move them over our background? Well, that's going to be all having to do with the blend mode. And so what I would do is I would take a picture like this, and I would make sure I ramp down the blacks. And I'm just visually looking now at the moon itself. I might take the exposure down. My job was to get this as black as possible. I even on a couple went into the Tony Kuiper TK7. I selected the moon, and then I inverted the selection, and then took a curves and pulled down so all of this would go black. But the nice thing out here on the West Coast on November 8th of this year, even though I'm going to be in Patagonia and I'll miss it, is that it's going, the entire sequence, you're going to be able to see. I think it starts, the first part of the eclipse will start at 10 at night, and it goes all the way till 3 in the morning. So take some coffee, a good book, some friends and make a night of it. Really, when you're out there shooting, the adrenaline's going, and you're really, you're pretty stoked, is what I'm trying to say. Let's go back over into library mode. So those were two things I had to deal with because I had never tried this before, and I kind of held my breath and I go, oh, how do I get around this situation? So let me come over to this folder, and these are all my selects, all these green frames. Here's my background. This I'll show you in a little bit when we start in. And you can see I got I'm just going to rifle through them very quickly. I was able to get 4 usable frames before the moon went into total eclipse. Now you got to change your exposure for the next frame, right? But the sky is getting darker now. So this was the first of the full eclipse, and to our eye, you could barely even see that moon. But it's amazing what these digital cameras can capture. And let's take a look at some of these, because you got to pay attention to your ISO. As it gets dark, you're going to have to bump your ISO. Everything held at 600 millimeter f8, and then it was just varying the shutter speed. And what I did is a lot of bracketing. Let me go back over into this folder. Whoops. My apologies, I keep hitting the T key instead of the G key. Let me get to where these moons actually started. Okay, so here's a sequence. As I was done shooting a sequence, I would point the camera down to the mountains where there was no exposure, and I'd shoot a black frame. So now that tells me these next sequences, until I get to this next frame, these 6 frames are all of the moon relatively at the same time. So when I first started shooting, I was shooting about every 3 to 5 minutes. But once the moon got into full eclipse, it was going to last for 84 minutes, the full eclipse, before it started to go the last hour where it was coming out of the eclipse. And so I would just set the timer on my iPhone to every 10 minutes. I felt that was enough. And really, I probably didn't even need that. 15 minutes would have been more doable because it didn't change a whole lot. But in my thinking, I would rather have too much than too little, because, it's just a click. You're standing there anyway. You could do it every 5 minutes if you wanted to. But it kind of felt like 10 was perfect, and I knew things weren't changing all that much. And you can see I go down. There's a break. So here's a whole new sequence. Somebody asked me what that was. Well, there's going to come a transition when you're shooting these moons to where this is now where the partial is starting to come back. In other words, we're going to work towards getting to see the whole moon. And there was some mist and some clouds starting to form in the sky up there. And this was just ice crystals that because I had to set my exposure to record this part of the moon, the part that's actually lit by the sun, which is this, got washed out. To our eye, we can see that. But again, these camera sensors have not caught up to the full extent of human vision. That's so important to know and to realize. Now you're seeing it. So let me back up. That's what I would call my transition phase. That's about maybe 1/6 of the moon or 1/5 of the moon lit there. So then I had to make a decision, and you can see now I'm getting 2/5. I'm not quite at half. And I thought, bang, this is the transition point. So I had shot these because I wasn't sure. Then I changed my exposure. Let me keep going here. And as you can see, this really threw me. This is what was causing that glow to come off. Clouds started forming out of nowhere. I believe that what had happened, it was actually very warm where we were standing. I want to say it was in the 60s, if I remember. I asked Barry when we were pulling away. We were standing, so that was a lot of heat rising off the ground. And to the right of this is the ocean. And I think the cool air of the ocean was coming over and causing clouds to just form. And it was just forming up around the moon. It was the weirdest thing. So you had to see that I was having to find holes. And I still had at this point 40 minutes to go. 10:55 is when the eclipse was going to be over. And I just had to stay patient. There would have been another hole up in here, and there was a lot of wind up there. So this was all moving really quick. So here, what I did, let's go back here. Here's where I'm trying to expose for the moon, still the reddish of the moon, which you can see I got there. And then because I knew I was in that transition phase, I went back and reshot transitions to where I just recorded what was, went back now and set my exposure to what was going to control the highlight of that moon. So I hope that makes sense to you. There's going to be that transition stage. If I kept shooting at this, I'd just get a washed out disc, right? So now my exposures are just clearly on the moon, okay? And then I even tried one. You can see what I'm talking about. I switched off here to my 24-105 Sony, which I think should just be a G Master designation, but it's not. It's just a razor sharp lens. So don't let, these G lenses for you non-Sony shooters simply means to get a G Master designation. They're the highest resolution lens, corner to corner, edge to edge. But this 24-105, it is a staple in my landscape bag, and I use it all the time because the faster of the two lenses is the 2.8, which is a G Master, but that only goes 24-70, and I like that little extra reach out to 105. So I did shoot this, but you're going to see, this is what I had envisioned when I scouted on Saturday night. Even if I could lighten that up a little, shot a frame just before the light went off it, there's nothing, it could have been a mountain anywhere in the country or in the world. So there's nothing that really separated that off. So that's why I decided for the rock. Okay, now, what I did is in collections in Lightroom, and you can do this any way you want, I just set up a folder called Lunar Eclipse. And I would just go through, and we'll go through all my selections here, of each frame that I felt of every sequence I shot that was the sharpest and best exposed. And I changed my exposure on every sequence that I photographed. That's why you're going to see some of these jumping around, because I didn't reframe through the sequence and the moon's moving to camera right and up towards the top right of the frame because it's still climbing. So these were the 4 that I had before it went into full eclipse. Now we're going into the full blood moon. Okay, and you can see up here if you want to watch the exposures. I opened up now to f6.3 because I needed more light. 6400, which for the A7S III, and I'll talk about this. It's basically my designated night camera. Now people are going to go, those of you who know the Sony lineup, go, well, the A7R4 and the A1 and the couple of the newer cameras do a great job at night. True. But this is only 12 megapixels, and so every photocell just has a better ability to capture a cleaner signal-to-noise ratio. And I can shoot this camera up to 12,800 and pass it through Topaz Denoise AI, and it just cleans it right up. And I knew these moons were going to be relatively small in the overall frame of Morro Rock. Okay, so I opted for clean, non-noisy moons, and you can see these haven't even been run through any noise reduction, and you can see how clean they are. So then another question I got asked, well, at 12 megapixel, you're going to have a 36, 37 meg file, and I did. But I ran all of these through, the moons I ran through Topaz Gigapixel, and I enlarged them all up. And the final frame, I just brought it back into Lightroom and ran through Lightroom's new Enhance. I guess it's not so new anymore. It's under Photo, and you go to Enhance. And it took that 37 meg file and it resed it up to 125 megs, which is big enough. That's a great size. And everything was nice and sharp and relatively noise-free. Now we're starting to hit the phase, okay, where I showed you in the contact sheet where we're starting to exit the eclipse. There's the one where it caught the ice crystals where I had to shoot it through the clouds. There was another one I ended up not using this frame, I don't believe. And then that was my transition stage where I said, okay, we got enough of the moon, at least half of the moon is showing now. So it's going to be too glaring to show that. And you really couldn't balance this in a single frame. I mean, you either had to expose for the blood red of the moon or for the highlight of the moon. And this is where now I just started going for the highlight of the moon and just stayed all the way. Here's one just before. This was shot a minute before the eclipse was over. And then this was shot 2 minutes after the eclipse was over. And then our night was over. I didn't have to worry about, this was probably at about, let's see, we came out of eclipse at 10:55. This frame was captured at 10:57. The funny thing was, when we pulled into this parking lot, it was jam full of people, stargazers, astronomy nuts, other photographers. And when we got in the last 40 minutes of shooting, it was just Barry and I. Everybody left. As soon as that moon came out of blood moon, everybody left. So that's how I conceived the image. That's how I captured the elements of the image. I'm going to catch my breath here now, and we're going to go into how I processed the image. Okay, the processing of the image. And I think this is what, hopefully all of the stuff we've already talked about has really helped you, because if you kind of muck it up, you guys, and you don't get proper exposures, and or if a cloud cover comes in halfway through the sequence of the lunar eclipse, all your planning is going to go down the drain, and we don't want that to happen. So a couple of things when you're planning for your moonshot in November, again, November 8th, get on Google, figure out exactly where you plan to shoot. Google Earth will really help you to get some elevation. If you're in an area close to the coast that at that time of year you can start, we're getting into the rainy season out here, storms could move in. Maybe you want to take a trip out to the desert and get out somewhere where you're just in an expanse of blue sky during the day, and no chance at storms moving in at night. So you got to become a weather bug. And about a week out, I would have 2 or 3 locations in mind. And then I would constantly be checking the weather forecast starting a week out to see if there's any potential of storms moving in and kind of messing things up for you. That would be the first thing. Here, the thing that, as I've explained a number of times, what could have messed me up along the coast, especially at this time of the year, not rain, we wish we had it, but fog. So I chose elevation. I have to get above in case the fog layer begins. It usually stays low, and it's not going to get up, way up in the sky where I'm looking up at these moons. The next thing is to make sure every one of your moon shots is processed and sharpened. Little tip I'll give you, I showed you how to get the background. Now this was no brainer, because here I was just exposing for that and it was turning the background black. But in my sharpening, what I did here is, you can see I would pull up on the amount, and then I'm on a Mac, so I'd hold the Option key, or if you're on a PC, you hold the Alt key. And if you didn't have this masking, whatever white's going to get the full amount of this sharpening, right? Well, we only want the moon to get the sharpening. And so I would pull that over, and just till the details of the moon would sharpen up. And that's how I did my sharpening on every moon. And then I would check the histogram. This is really important too. This doesn't have to be washed out white, but the brightest, which is the area down in here, I wanted to move that over on the histogram as far as I could without, actually activating that white highlight and then you see the red come up. I would back it off until those went away, and now I had my moon and everything exposed properly. So you want to go through and you want to get all of your moons every stage of your moon that you plan to pull into the shot. And it's important that they're already processed, ready to go, as well as your background picture. Okay, so now here comes the fun part. I'm not gonna do all 16 moons. This would take forever to do, but I'm gonna bring a few of them in. We'll do them at different stages, and I just want to show you the process of how you go about doing it. So what I would do is I would come back into Lightroom, and let me just let me get back into here. Let's bring the first one in. And let's bring one in where it's in full blood moon, and let's bring one in as it's exiting out. Okay, and we're going to open these up. Now, at this point, I tried selecting all and opening up into Photoshop, and you can, and what you'll do is you'll right click on all your images and it'll say open into Photoshop as layer stack. The problem was I went in and I had cropped some of these moons to get some stuff out of the way that I thought would prevent me from doing it. So it wanted to crop every picture. So I had to bring them in one at a time, which that is totally fine. So here's the process. You can see I've got 3 of my moons here. I would open up just one frame at a time. I opened them all that way and it went all the way across and I lost my base image over here. So then I said, let's just back up, go one at a time, and I'm going to show you the process I did. So Command or Control A to select, Command or Control C to copy, very basic stuff. Come over to the base image, Command or Control V to paste. Okay? Now, what we are going to do, and this is where the magic comes in to get the background to drop out and allow you the moon. You have to be working in Photoshop or a program with layers. I don't know if Affinity Pro I know has layers, and I don't know what their blend mode situation, but if you go up here by default, it's always normal. So what you need to do here is you need to go to the light and blend mode, and that's where the magic begins. Now, you see these great, big, huge moons, you know, on that some of these photographers post, and a lot of times they're just doing this, and then they're going to do this next step I do. So now with this layer highlighted, I'm going to come up under Edit. I'm going to go to Transform, and I am going to no, excuse me. I want to scale. There it is. My eye was looking down below. Okay, I want to go to Transform, and I want to go to Scale. And you can see that puts a scale box. So I just grab from the left side here because the other side's covered up. And I'm just going to hold the Shift key and pull down so it pulls it down. Let me undo that. You don't have to Command Z. And I'm going to hit, well, let's just go back in our history. Let me get out of this. I'm glad I'm making these mistakes because you will make them. Again, this is new to me also. We're going to change the blend mode. Let's start again. And then we're going to come up into Edit. And we are going to come up to Transform and Scale. Don't hold the Shift key. Just start pulling down. Scale will hold the scale. And this is where you're just sort of starting to eyeball the moon. And I'm going to pull that down even more. Now, you don't have to be perfect on this step. And when you get it where you know, again, I'm visualizing the arc, you don't have to be perfect because every one of these is going to be on a layer that you can come back to and resize if you needed to resize, or reposition if you needed to reposition. So just get it in the approximate location and the approximate size, come up here and click the checkbox, and now that's on there. Now, here's where I was saying you only open one frame at a time, because now that's part of the composite. So now I can close out of here and I would go on to my next moon. Excuse me. So again, I don't want to do all 16. It would take forever. So let's go to the next one that I'm going to pick of the 3. So Controller Command A, Controller Command C to copy, come back to our image, Controller Command V to paste. Okay, come on, paste in there. There we go. And come up to the blend mode and go to lighten. Okay, and then we're going to come up under Edit, and we're going to go to Transform, Scale, and don't hold the Shift key, as we've learned. Just pull it down a little, start to move it in, and I'm going to place this guy just kind of up in here. This is the cool thing. You can move them around wherever you want, click, and bang. Now there's one more thing. Let's get out of this picture. We don't need it anymore. let's go to our last one, and I want to show you something here. Command A to select, Command C to copy, Command V to paste, and change the blend mode now to lighten. How do we keep these moons looking relatively the same size? Well, this was the little trick I figured out. Some of you may already know where I'm going here. I just bring this down, kind of relative to what you can see when I'm tugging on this that there are numbers. That would be one way to do it, but I would simply drag it up over the previous moon, and what I would do is come up here to the opacity and take it down to about 50%. Close enough. Now you can see the moon I want to overlay and the moon that I've already placed, and I would just grab from one of the four corners, and you can see that's still a little bit too big, and right about there we have it the same size. So this is the way you can keep all of your I'm going to grab the move tool here now and just move the moon down over into this part. So you can imagine where I've had all the arcing moons, and then when it's done, if I go, well, that moon is too close to that edge, I can always come back as long as I've grabbed the move, and if I needed to resize it, I just go back up into transform, scale, and I can resize it, say it's a little too big and I wanted to bring it down, and accept it with that check mark. And here's the other cool thing. You can go to transform and you can go to rotate. And if you want to kind of rotate your moon around whichever way you might want it. But I think I only had to rotate one or two moons during the entire eclipse, and it was kind of coming up in here. And then I just kept, once I hit the apex, then I kept kind of dragging them down. And then when I finished my final shot, let me go back into Lightroom because I think I've closed out of this frame already. Whoops. Okay. I've hidden all my icons down here. When I came into the final shot, well, here's going part way. So you can see, I think it might have been this moon I started to rotate, this one and this one a little bit. And then I didn't want the moon to, I've seen some where they just hover, they end where they begin here, and that looks a little unnatural. As I said earlier, I think I told you if I didn't, I started to go up in a diagonal, but because this moon was so bright, it was tugging the eye out of the frame, so I just went with the natural arc of the arch. I discovered that when I finished, I wanted about the same relative size from here to here, over to here to here. And I had to go in under Photoshop and Canvas and extend the canvas a little bit. I could have went in and selected all 16 of these again, started moving each one, but I just added a little more room to balance it out to over here. I could have probably added just a smidgen more, and I might have. I don't think this is the actual final frame. One of these in here might be. But anyway, that is how you accomplish all of this. When you're done, my recommendation would be to, let's go back to Photoshop, would be you'll have what, in me, I had 16 plus the background, so that's 17 layers. I went up and saved that, and I saved it as a PSD file. And then I did a duplicate and I flattened it and saved that out as a TIFF at 8-bit and sent that off to Getty, and it's already up on their site, hopefully making money. And then I just took that flattened file and I do mine. I'm not going to get into the Tony Kuiper thing here, but this command and this command allows me to size it out for the web, and it adds my watermark to it. And somehow Siri got activated. So that's really how it's done, guys. It's pretty easy in theory, right? Well, I probably spent 4 hours in processing because I screwed it up a few times. All the time out spent scouting and shooting. But it is, I'll tell you, when you got it done and you have the finished image and you put it out there, I was blown away by the amount of response that I got to this image. I was almost sick of it by the time I was done with it, just relieved that I got it and it was in the bag. But it just lit up on social media, so it's really kind of fun. So I hope this clarifies it for those of you. You can go back and read the blog, it'll fill in any of the blanks I might have missed. Leave comments in the comments section below. And start planning. Never too soon to plan. Have a couple backup locations. Start checking your weather. Go out and practice. You got a lot of months now in between now and November where you can shoot the next full moon and practice the processing side of this and just see what you can come up with. So when it's go time, you're out there and you're going. And I would recommend going out the night before because you get a really good handle on where the moon's going to be coming up, where it's going to be arcing in the sky, and you can create your own lunar eclipse, blood moon. They do call them superlunars again because they're within 90% of the closest position moon could get to Earth, which is over 225,000 miles away. That's why the moon looks so bright and why the moon looks a little bigger to the eye, anywhere from 7 to 14%, I believe, somewhere in that range. So that's kind of a long-winded version of how I put this all together. Go out and have some fun with it. Do your own shot. Start sharing them on social media. I'll be in Patagonia, but I'll be looking on the 9th at all your masterpieces. So until next time, this is Don Smith. You take care.